You may recall, if you were here then, it's been better than 2 years ago now, that I challenged our church to pray. And I asked God to call out from our church either a missionary or a minister of some kind, someone to carry the gospel, and that he would do it within the next 12 years, or 12 months rather, 12 years. Yeah, sometimes it feels like 12 years, doesn't it? Well, within just a few months of that, Makita came to me and said she sensed that God was leading her to be a part of this missions endeavor that ultimately culminated in the world race for her. And she visited a number of countries. How many did you make it through? 8 countries. And wow, you know, that was an answer to prayer. I know that many of you present prayed for her regularly, daily. Had her picture on my refrigerator. I had her photo on my desk downstairs. I had it upstairs. I had her name in a prayer journal. I had her picture on 2 boards downstairs, and every time I walked by that picture, I'd stop and I'd pray for Makita during that time. So I didn't pray perfectly, I know, but I tried to pray for her sometimes 3, 4, 5 times a day. I prayed for this sister of ours that God used. I'm excited to hear what God did through her ministry. I'm excited about it. I believe she has a story that we need to hear tonight. I believe she's going to share some things. She has some video. Go ahead and turn that projector on, because she has some video. Y'all pray for the projector. Let's see if it works. And she's going to show us a few things here, some slides and whatnot, and share with us. Wherever you're comfortable down here, up here, you come make yourself comfortable and you share. Afterwards, we're going to have an invitation. Now, let me ask this question. Where'd Brother Chuck go? Chuck, where are you? There you are. You're back. You're up front a little closer. Anyway. Okay. You guys leave this week, right? Okay, so when we come to the invitation time, part of the invitation, we are going to ask the Middlebrooks to come forward, and we're going to pray for them. They're going to Thailand. Y'all, that's a long trip. That's 24 hours in the air. Bless their hearts. You know, and so we want to be praying for them and the ministry that they're going to be involved in as they go out. And so keep that in mind. Makita, come up, share with us, please.
I guess I'll just stand up here since I'm short. Should I wait till the pictures start?
That's up to you.
No-go? The pictures are a no-go. Okay, that's fine. I'm sorry you don't get to see my beautiful face on the projector. Can you hear me now? Great. Okay. So, as you know, I went to 8 different countries in the process of 8 months. I hate standing up here. I'm scooting down. I was supposed to go to 11, but the Lord had other plans, so made it to 8.
Hello.
How is this? Great. Okay, so it took a long time for me to finally come up with what I'm going to say, and I'm going to be honest, I still don't really know. I'm just going to let the Lord lead me, and whatever comes out of my mouth will be a blessing to all of us, myself included. Throughout the course of the 8 months, I had a lot of challenges. And I'm going to kind of go through some of those, and I'm also going to talk about the triumphs that the Lord shared with me or gave me. The countries that I went to were Uganda, Rwanda, Ethiopia, India, Nepal, Thailand, Cambodia, and Malaysia. Some of those countries I loved and I would gladly go back, and some of them that will be my last time to ever venture to. Oh, I saw the light came on and got excited. It was nothing. And so my very first country was Uganda, and it was also my very favorite country, purely because of the ministry that was there. The Lord moved in some really big ways in Uganda and is continuing to move in really big ways. And that is the country that I will go back to one day. I don't know how, I don't know when, but I will go back. I worked with an organization called Raising Up Hope, Uganda, and we had a host named Patrick. And Patrick was a 24-year-old man who started the organization alone at the age of 18. And that's pretty impressive by itself. But the really impressive thing about this organization and about Patrick was that when he was 16, the Lord gave him the vision for this ministry. He was living on the streets. He was living in the slums. He had a little sister that he was taking care of and no other family. And the Lord gave him this vision. He said, Patrick, you are going to take care of the kids on the streets. You're going to start an organization, an orphanage for them. You're going to start a free school for them. And one day it's going to be a very large organization. And Patrick said, okay. And so 2 years later, he had the opportunity to meet a wonderful woman from the States who actually wanted to adopt him, but he told her no because his place was in Uganda. And she offered to buy him his very first orphanage home. And so he took her up on it, and he purchased his first home with the money that she sent him. And now he has 4 homes, 2 boys' homes, 2 girls' homes, a free school. He's building an organization called the Village of Hope, which is just an entire village for these orphaned children that has a school, it has a nursing station, it has homes for them. It's literally a village for children. And he also goes to the slums where he talks to kids, he ministers to them, he feeds them. I could go on and on about Uganda. I could literally talk about it the entire time because it was my favorite, and we did so much when we were there. But I'm going to try to cut it short so I can talk about the other countries too. But the first time that we went to the slums, I'm going to admit I was a little terrified. Whenever we were going down there, we were in a van. Patrick told us, he was like, now, these kids are a little rough. He was like, they're not going to smell good. They haven't bathed in months. Most of them are completely high. They, totally altered on gasoline because they haven't eaten in days. And the gasoline's the only thing that can keep their pain away. And so that's what they do. They act inappropriately. He was like, they're going to fight. They're going to hit each other. There will probably be bleeding. And they're going to want to be huggy with you. They're going to want to hug you. They're going to want to talk to you. They're going to want you to hold their hand because people do not talk to them. In Uganda, people in the slums are regarded as trash. Like they are not seen, they are not heard. If they do go on the street, they are beaten. When we were there, 2 of the kids were killed because they went out of the slums onto the street. And so the kids in the slums, they're not loved. And so that was our biggest job, Patrick told us, was to love the kids when we went in there. And we were a little frightened. We went in not fully sure what to expect. And then we were bombarded by 50 slum kids, ranging from, small, ages 4 up to 17, 18. And we took them to this back little alley where they sat on a dirt floor, and we fed them food. And we read them Bible stories where we had someone translate for us. And then we just talked to them. And at the end of that experience, 4 of the girls did not want to go back. And we had to pray really hard to get all 7 of us to agree to go back to the slums because it was terrifying. Ha-ha, a picture. That's from Thailand. Because it was terrifying. Some of the boys went up and kissed the girls on the mouth. Just lots of physical interaction that the girls were not comfortable with. And it was our very first month. So they had a really hard time with it. But in the end, we prayed about it and we decided that we were going back. And it ended up being one of our very favorite experiences. We fell in love with the boys there. We fell in love with Patrick. And I know if you asked any of us again if we would do it, we would say we would do it again in a heartbeat. While we were there, we also taught at the free schools, where I met a little boy named Joseph who was in my class. And Drew and I decided to sponsor him because he was the only little boy that lived in the orphanage who was not sponsored. He had a sponsor, and then his uncle came to claim him. And whenever his uncle came to claim him, his sponsor dropped him because he had someone taking care of him. But unfortunately, his uncle died like a month after claiming him, and so he went back to the orphanage, and he hadn't had a sponsor for a year. And so I messaged Drew, and I was like, Drew, I really want to sponsor this little boy. Can we sponsor this little boy? And by we, I mean him, because he had money and I didn't have a job. And so him being as sweet as he is, he agreed, and he let me sponsor Joseph. And then I met a little girl named Walda, it was probably my hardest goodbye of the entire race. She was in the 2nd grade, and she was beautiful and so sweet. Her mother washed clothes for a living. That's how she made their money. And her father was in prison, and Walda was my very favorite person. I loved that little girl, and as I left, I stared at her, and she stared back at me, and she just cried. And we just cried as I drove away. It was probably the most heartbreaking moment of my life. Anyway. I digress. After Uganda, we went to Rwanda, and we worked with a woman named Fatia, who worked with genocide survivors and people affected by the genocide that happened in Rwanda in the 90s. Was it the 90s or the 70s? Anyone know? I think it was 1994, but that could have been Cambodia. Was it? Yeah, okay, it was Rwanda, 1994 to 1995. And so she worked with survivors and their children and their grandchildren, like whoever was there. She had a free school for them. In Africa, school is not free, by the way, because I've mentioned free schools twice, and that is not a common thing. Schools are very expensive, and very few people get to go. So the fact that these two organizations had free schools was pretty amazing for the children that had the opportunity of going to it. But we worked at a free school. We got up and spoke messages on Sunday mornings, and we led Bible studies for women's group, children's groups, and married couples, which was funny because none of us were married, bless our hearts. We tried, though. And Rwanda was the most beautiful country I went to. I would go back. I liked it. Uganda was still my favorite, though, mostly because the ministry there was just amazing. After Rwanda, I went to Ethiopia. I was hoping that an Ethiopia picture would be showing, but it wasn't. I went to Ethiopia, and we worked with Toledo Rise Up, which was it was kind of like an orphanage. It didn't start out as an orphanage. It was actually supposed to be an organization for teenage girls who were in that's Ethiopia, who were in destitute situations. But they soon discovered that these girls in destitute situations tended to have babies or babies on the way. And so they ended up having to start a babies' home where they had 25 babies at their max. And then when I was there, they had 7, which was perfect because there were 7 of us. So we each got to tote around a baby all the time, and it was fabulous. My baby was Kasal, and I wanted to bring him home with me. I'll tell you how I met Kasal. I walked in the room, and he was sitting on the floor, and I instantly fell in love. And as I fell in love with him, he burst into tears because he was terrified of me. That terror didn't really subside too much. He still cried pretty much every time he looked at me. But I was still in love with him, and he made me smile, and I would make him laugh occasionally, which, uplifted my heart. When we were in Ethiopia, we also went and fed the elderly in the area. See, in Uganda, you could sponsor children, but in Ethiopia, you can sponsor the elderly. And so some of the elderly couples who didn't have children or anyone to look after them, you could sponsor them. And so people in the States would sponsor them, and we would go and we would check up on those who had been sponsored, just introduce ourselves, talk to them. We got to ask them questions, make sure that they were okay, find out what they needed. And then we also did a feeding program for the children in Ethiopia, because while we were there, and actually currently, Ethiopia is having a drought in one section, and in that one section, they're having a complete famine, and so they're having a really hard time. Lots of people are starving to death and dying, children included. Where we were was Urugualam. It wasn't as bad, but they do have a severe problem currently with food. Ethiopia. India was India next? Yeah, India was next. Sorry, I cannot remember anything. I went to too many places and did too many things. India was interesting. India is one of those countries I wouldn't go back to. It is a place where people are called. And it is a place where some people are not called. And I do not believe that I am one of those people that was called to go to India. It's kind of terrifying to me. The whole time I was there, I felt afraid. I had to pray about that a whole lot. There's just a huge, I'm going to say, I know there are children in here. I hate to, there's an RAPE. There's a huge culture of that. And so women are not really counted as very significant there. And so we were not allowed to go anywhere by ourselves. We really weren't allowed to go anywhere in the daytime. We were locked in our church pretty much the entire time, except for at night, where we were like loaded into a van that was completely blacked out, and then we were driven to a village like an hour away, and we would preach when we got to the village, and then they would feed us. And the food in India is literally phenomenal. I'm telling you, it was my favorite food. I would eat it now. It was really hot. We had to eat it with our hands. I got really good at it. Only the right hand, though, because the left hand's considered dirty. You don't do that. And so I ate lots of good food in India. I, spent a lot of time locked inside that church, and I got to share messages with villagers, which it was fun. It was a good experience. I'm glad I got to do it, and I know that the Lord really worked there. I know that He spoke to some of the people in the villages, because the majority of them were of the Hindu faith. And so I know He used that time, but it was not my favorite time, personally. But I know He used it. After India, we went to Nepal. Nepal was another struggle in a whole different way. I loved Nepal. It's beautiful. I would recommend anyone going. As you know, Nepal had an earthquake literally right before I went. It was a few months before I went, and so they have a severe gas shortage right now. They're having a whole lot of economic problems. People aren't really wanting to go travel there, and the majority of their money is made through travelers, tourism. And so while we were there, they were having a lot of economic difficulties. They had power very little. It would turn off at random times, which is fine. They didn't have hot water, and it was like 40 degrees, which I'm from Mississippi, so that was freezing. I wore like 3 pair of pants, 3 shirts, a jacket, a scarf, and a headband at all times, and I was still cold. If you see any pictures with jackets, it's Nepal, because everywhere else was hot. But Nepal was a challenge because our host, as soon as we got there, dropped us. He told us, "Well, I told the World Race I didn't want a team, and they sent you anyway, so you're going to be on your own." We were like, okay, it's month 4, we can do that. And so we had to kind of come up with our own ministry. And while that was a challenge, I will say that the Lord taught me so much about finding opportunities and seeking out opportunities for ministry, and the simple fact that like everyday life is ministry. I don't have to go halfway across the world to seek out ministry. It's right here all the time. Going to Walmart can be a ministry. Going outside your door can be a ministry, and that's something that the Lord taught me. He also taught me the importance of prayer. We spent a lot of time prayer walking, and at the beginning of the month, I admit I thought that, that was a little beneath me. I didn't think that was quite good enough. That wasn't quite ministry, and the Lord was really quick to tell me that, well, if Jesus did it, He thought I could. And so we spent a lot of time praying, and I discovered the importance of it. I also discovered spiritual warfare and what that felt like, and the fact that it wasn't fun. I sent Brother Kevin an email in Nepal at the end of it, and I was like, I cannot do this anymore. Like, I cannot do this. I'm coming home. I literally am coming home. He was so nice. He sent me the nicest response back. He probably thought I was crazy, but I think he understood. No, not at all. 'Cause in that moment, I felt a little crazy. I had, anytime I would close my eyes to pray, or anytime we would worship, I would get the worst images in my head. The scariest, most awful images, and they just would not go away, and it happened for the entire month. It did not end until I left Nepal and went to Cambodia. And they were images of things that, they're not normal thoughts and images, So I had a really hard time there. I got sick. I was eating very, very little. I ended up going to the hospital. Nepal, not my favorite country because of those. Not my favorite month, I should say. The country itself is wonderful. But the experience, it was hard. It was very hard, but it taught me a lot. After Nepal, I went to Cambodia, where what did we do in Cambodia? We worked at a church where we taught children English. But we didn't really teach them. We were supposed to be teaching them English, but none of them knew any English words. Like none, not even hello. And so we pretty much just had bubble dance parties, and we colored. We played soccer, which I didn't play soccer. I just kind of ran around the field because I have no idea how to do that. Did lots of athletic things because in Cambodia, really any country, they really love to be outside in the heat. It is their favorite thing. And so we did a lot of that and just loving on the kids. The kids that were in the house were adopted by the pastor. But the pastor was really very busy. He was a very busy man, and so he wasn't there very often. And so the kids were kind of left to just tend to themselves. And while they were in a better situation than they were before he adopted them, they were still in a pretty sad situation. They just didn't really get any love. They were very self-sufficient, and so they didn't really like to be loved on at first. But eventually, they warmed up to us and let us love on them. One little boy actually broke his collarbone when we were there, and it went 3-4 days. And finally, we were like, "What happened to your why are you holding your shoulder this way?" And he was like, "Well, I fell. I think I dislocated it." Through a translator, by the way. He didn't say that on his own. And so we were like, "Okay, well, have you been to the doctor?" And he was like, "No, pastor, can't take me because he's too busy." We were like, okay. So we decided to take him. So one of my teammates and I took him to the doctor, and pastor wasn't very happy with us about it, but we told him we'd pay for it, so he was a little bit, happier about it. But we took him to the doctor and found out he had a, broken collarbone, and so the doctor was super glad that we brought him. We paid for him to have one more visit after we left. I hope that the pastor took him. I'm assuming he did. It was like 30 minutes away from their house. It was a pretty long drive, which doesn't seem that long here, but in any other country, a 30-minute drive really is. Like, that is like a whole nother town. And so it, isn't really heard of that you would travel that far. But that's Cambodia right there. Those are the kids that didn't speak English. That's Thailand. Speaking of Thailand, that's our next country. Thailand was another challenge for me. I spent the entire month crying, literally the entire month, over nothing. Well, sometimes I was crying over something. The majority of the time, I was just crying. Couldn't tell you why. It was just my, favorite pastime of Thailand. I got there, and the very first day we met our host. His name was Pat. And Pat grew up in Alabama, but he was from Thailand. And me and Pat had an interesting relationship. When we first met each other, we did not care for each other at all. He literally made me cry within 5 minutes, which wasn't a huge feat considering it was Thailand, but still. He told us about the ministry, and he told us that he worked with boys who are being rehabilitated. They're in prison, and he moves them in from prison to his home. He lets them start a program where they move in with him, and they're being rehabilitated for murder or for that R word that I mentioned earlier. I just don't want to say that with kids. I don't know. And so he was like, "I'm just going to go ahead and tell you that safety is not guaranteed here. Like, you are working with murderers and that other word." And he was like, "And if something happens to you, I'm sorry, it was the Lord's will." And so we're a group of 7 girls, and I had a really hard time with that. So I literally left the meeting just crying. Like, I was like, "We're all going to die here. This is going to be terrible." And I did not want to go the first day. That was the first country where I didn't want to do it. I did not want to go to ministry. And so we went. And it turns out he just took us to a school. We didn't even work with the boys that day. And we went to this Buddhist school where we got to sit in and watch their ceremony of worshiping Buddha. It was one of the weirdest things I've ever experienced. There was a chair in the front of the room with a monk, and the monk was maybe 8 years old. He was sitting in the chair, and kids were just like bowing to him and bringing him like burnt offerings and goods. Like, it was, I've never seen anything like it. And so we just kind of had to sit there, just, trying to figure out what was happening. And then after that, we were allowed to go and teach English to the kids. And they also allowed us to teach them Jesus Loves Me songs. I'm not entirely sure if they knew like what the songs meant and if they were just okay with it, or if they had no idea what the words meant. But they actually like encouraged us to sing those and teach those to them. And at the very end ceremony, the kids sang a song about Jesus. I don't remember the name of it. I'd never heard of it before. It was one that a YWAM, Youth with a Mission group, had taught them before. But they ended with a Jesus song, which I thought was really interesting. Something else we did in Thailand was we had a classroom, and it showed a picture of it. It was a really junky room. If you saw the picture of the really junky room, that was a classroom. And they brought us to the classroom, and they were like, "We need you to clean this." and make it look good for students to be in it. And we were like, okay. So we cleaned out all of this stuff, and they wanted us to store it, but we threw it all away because we didn't feel like they needed it. There are a few things we let them keep, but we threw most of it away. We found one very large spider and one dead scorpion, but other than that, and a whole lot of termites. But other than that, we were like pretty good. And I was terrified when I saw that group that we were going to see a whole lot of spiders, which are my least favorite thing. So anyway, we cleaned up that room, we painted it, and we worked with the students, and then he took us to meet the boys, the boys I was so afraid of. And we meet them, and they're like 14-year-olds, and they're just like so nice and friendly. And I was like, why did I think he was going to kill me? Like, he's so nice. And so we went to church with them a lot. We would eat with them. They really were just, unless they really were just average, normal, young. They weren't even average or normal because they were so much nicer than the teenagers that I know. Like, they were such nice kids, And something the Lord taught me through that was the fact that, sometimes you can't really judge a book by its cover. And even if that cover is really terrifying and it says, things like murderer on it, like, you don't know the situation, you don't know the circumstances, and also you don't know how the Lord can change a person's heart. And so he really taught me that you just have to kind of go with it and trust him and know that he is in charge of any situation that he puts you in. And so, yeah, that was Thailand. By the end of Thailand, I was pretty sure that I needed to go home, but I was battling it. Because the entire month of Thailand, that's what the Lord and I had been talking about, was the fact that I was like, I don't want to go home, but I want to go home. I was like, I don't know if I can cry every day for the next 4 months. Like, I just don't know if I can do that. But I was like, no, you have to, Makita. The Lord called you here. This is where he wants you. And so when I was at something called Debrief, it's where our leadership came in. They're the adults from Georgia. They come in and what is the word? Mentor us, find out where we are, check in, make sure we're okay. The majority of us were not okay by that point. We had some serious struggles on our squad of 45 people. And in 1 month, 8 of us went home. And so I talked to a lady named Miss Eileen, and she told me she was pretty sure I needed to go home. But I was like, I'm pretty sure, Miss Eileen, that I cannot do that. And so I decided, I was like, I'm not going home. Like, I know you think I should, but me and the Lord, we have this figured out. And so I decided I was going to continue on. And then I got to Malaysia, and I was there one day, and I cried the entire day. And then I was like, maybe Eileen, was onto something. Maybe it is okay if I go home. Maybe it doesn't mean that I am an epic failure. And so I spent a lot more time praying about it again. Bless the Lord. I'm glad he doesn't get tired of my prayers because I know they were pretty repetitive at that point. But I prayed about it, and literally within a week of being in Malaysia, I knew that that was going to be my last country on the race, and that I was going to be coming home after that. And after that, after I made that decision, I felt so very free. I can't even explain it, and Malaysia ended up being such a wonderful experience. Malaysia is an Islamic country. You're not allowed to convert people into any religion, especially not Christianity. They will kick you out of their country if you're a foreigner. If you live there and you convert someone, you die. So it's pretty serious, apparently. But I made a lot of friends there, a lot of Muslim friends, a lot of Hindu friends, a lot of Buddhist friends. Malaysia's kind of like a melting pot of cultures, just like America is. I mean, I don't know why everyone moves there, because it's really hot. It's like Mississippi right now. No, it's Mississippi in August. That's what Malaysia feels like. It is hot and sticky. Like, it was the hottest country I went to. I would go back, though, just because I liked it so much. But I made a lot of friends there with people who were very unexpected, people that, I wasn't supposed to share the message with, but I found ways around that. Just casually in conversation, we just happened to mention it. And if they brought it up, you could talk about it. As long as they brought it up, you could talk about it. So if they would ask, so are you a Christian? Then we could say, yes, I am, and carry on with that. And so we did that a lot. Some of my favorite people were from Malaysia. I have a picture up here I don't know if it's come through or not. It may have, but it's a lady. Her name was Jamila, and it has me, her, and then 2 of my teammates, and we're in her dress shop, and she owned a Muslim clothing store, and so obviously it had very modest clothing, but it was not like the Punjabi. Is it called a no, it's not, it's India. What's it called? The whole thing, the black thing? Burqa, yes, thank you. I can't remember anything. It didn't have those because this was more of a non-traditional shop. Everything was really colorful and flashy, you know, but it was all like long sleeve, to the ankle, very loose fitted. I bought like 4 shirts. You're going to get to see them in the wintertime. I can't wear them now because it's too hot. But I did. I bought clothing from a Muslim shop, and I was super excited about it. I can't wait to wear them. I don't know. But it supported Jamila's family, and she was the sweetest lady I think I met there. She had 2 children. And she had a husband. She was actually from Thailand, but her husband, they married through, what is it called? It's not what we do here. Yes, arranged marriage. They met through arranged marriage from their parents, and she had to move over to Malaysia to marry him because women don't really have many options or choices in other countries, something else I have learned to be thankful for. So she moved over to Malaysia, and she'd been living there for 13 years. And I'm so glad I got to meet her. I feel like had I gone home in Thailand, I would have really regretted it because I would not have had the opportunity of meeting her or Paz, the Indian man who worked in the shop next to her, or an entire restaurant of people. It was an Indian restaurant that I ate at every meal, every day. For $1, I could get a huge meal. So I ate there every meal, including breakfast. I met all of the people there. There was a lady there. I don't know her name. I talked to her every single day, and by talked, I said, hello. And she said, hello. And I said, you're beautiful. And she said, you're beautiful. And I said, I love you. And she said, I love you too. And that's all she could speak in English. So that's all we just said that every day, every time I saw her. But I considered her my friend. We're Facebook friends. I still can't tell you what her name is because I have no idea how to pronounce it. I have no idea. But she was a super sweet lady. And had I not gone to Malaysia, I wouldn't have got the opportunity to meet her or the other individuals. Malaysia's probably my second favorite country after Uganda. Uganda and Malaysia. That's not what I expected to be my favorites. And, you know, I told you India was not my favorite. I should also tell you I didn't really like Ethiopia as a country, but I really liked the ministry, so it kind of, you know, made up for it. And then Cambodia had really big spiders. One, in fact, I have to tell you this story because it was so traumatizing that I will never get over it. I was getting my laundry off the line. They had a washing machine, which I was really excited about. We washed our clothes, and then we hung them up. And I was getting my laundry off, and I had been a little lazy, and I left them on there until nightfall, which you never do, ever. And so I'm collecting my laundry, and I was putting it in the bag, and then for some reason I just stopped, and I was just holding like a big wad of it in my hand. And I walked into the church where all the children were, and I was standing there talking to them. You know, I was talking, and they, you know, were talking, but we couldn't understand each other. And then all of a sudden, one of the kids says, spider. And I knew that word. And so I stopped, and I was like, it's not in my hand. It is not in my hand. And I looked down, and the biggest spider I have ever seen in real life was just sitting on my clothes in my hand, y'all. It was huge. And so I threw my laundry, and I screamed. And the other girl that was in there with me, Ashley, she screamed and threw her phone. I don't know why. But, and then the kids just died. They thought it was hysterical. And so they went around screaming and throwing stuff for the next 5 days. Anytime they saw us, they screamed and threw something. But one of the 7-year-olds killed the spider for me because I clearly couldn't do it. And then one of the little girls came and swept it up and threw it away because they're braver than I am. But yeah, Cambodia has huge spiders, and they run. They don't crawl, they run. Like, they're so fast. I don't know how that kid killed it. That was the 3rd spider experience. See, I'm getting nervous. I'm like sweating thinking about them. But that was the 3rd spider experience in Cambodia. The 2nd one was in our bedroom. I don't want to talk about that one. And then the 1st one was in the living room. Right after I prayed, I said this prayer. I said, Lord, please blind me to all the spiders. They can be here, but please don't let me see them. I was like, just blind me to them. And I was like, okay, I did it in India, and it worked. It's going to work again. And then I opened the door, and there's this huge spider just casually, you know, crawling across the wall. And I was like, okay, thanks, Lord. So I don't know what lesson he was teaching me then, but I'm sure it was something. But yeah, that's not my whole experience on the world race. I couldn't stand up here and tell you about it. Even if I took 2 hours, I couldn't explain the majority of it. I'm positive that it impacted me far more than I could have ever impacted anyone that I met there. I know I came back as a changed person. I learned a lot. The Lord showed me a lot, and He grew me spiritually and just as a person in general. I feel a lot older all of a sudden. I don't know how that happened. I left feeling 12, and I came back feeling, maybe 25. Not quite 27 yet, but I'm getting there. I do want to ask if anyone has any questions. I would love to answer them, and it helps me out because I can't think of anything to say. So if you have any questions. Yes?
The photograph has the two tall towers.
Those are the Petronas Towers. They're in Malaysia, in Kuala Lumpur. Yeah, KL. And they are, I want to say they're the largest towers in the world now. I think that our Twin Towers were larger than them, but I think they're the largest now. Yeah. You should definitely visit. They're beautiful. If you ever go to Malaysia, go to KL and see the Petronas Towers. Anything else? Yes, Ms. Raby. In which country? Uganda. In Uganda, a lot of them have been abandoned. They told us a story about one little boy who was in the home. They found him in a squatty potty. A squatty potty is where they go to the bathroom there. It's a giant hole that has a concrete slab on top of it, and then a little hole that you go to the bathroom in the hole. And that's pretty much every country uses squatty potties. I got very good at them. But they found the little boy in the squatty potty, and that was a very common thing for kids to just be abandoned. Now, that was a particularly horrible situation because who throws a child in a squatty potty? I think it was like 50 feet deep, and how they got the child out is, beyond me. It was kind of a miracle. But they got the little boy out, and he lived at the home after that. But most of them are abandoned. Some of them, their parents have died, but the majority of them are just abandoned because their parents can't take care of them. They just don't have the financial resources to do that. Yes? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Yes. Her question was, the kids in the slums, if once they become adults, are they allowed to go out into the streets? And the answer is no. If you're in the slums, typically you're in the slums permanently. There are a few cases like Patrick, he got out. But that was kind of one of those miracle situations, just a blessing from God. The majority of them don't make it to adulthood. They usually die before then from beatings, fights, drugs, not eating. The majority of them don't make it to adulthood, but most of them, if they're in the slums, they stay there permanently. Yeah. Yes, Joseph? He asked if there's anything that I learned that I could apply here, as in the church. I think one of the biggest takeaways, well, two, really. The first thing is, as I talked about prayer earlier and the importance of it and just how much you can do with prayer. And then the second thing that the Lord showed me, and I kind of mentioned it in Nepal as well, was ministry and how it's kind of an everyday life thing. It's not just going out and finding ministries. Well, no, that's not it. It's not going out far away to find ministry. It's seeking ministry at your own front door. And something that the Lord has really revealed to me about this church is just the huge ministry opportunity we have here at 38th with the community around us. The children's youth group up there. I'm sorry, that's two different programs. The children's group and the youth group up there. Brother Kevin's Spanish church. Y'all meet on Sunday nights, usually? Yeah, Sunday nights. That's a huge ministry. We are in the prime location for ministry opportunities right here. This entire church could be full of missionaries, just simply because of the fact that there's so many unreached people right outside of our door. And so the Lord's really been revealing to me just how called this church is to that ministry and how important it is. And it's not so much to just have the ministry. You know, we have a children's ministry, we have a youth ministry, we have a Spanish-speaking ministry or a Spanish church ministry. It's not so much just having them, it's being involved in them and everyone, you know, taking part in it, because that is what the Lord has given us here. He's given us a beautiful opportunity. And all we have to do is take it, because it will flourish and it will grow. And I fully believe all of these pews could be filled with the community if we all, you know, decided to take part in that. And I know it's kind of difficult sometimes, you know. I've seen our kids. Some of them, you know, like I met Mimi for the first time, and I love Mimi so much. If you know who I'm talking about, you love her too. If you don't, you should meet her. The first time I met Mimi, I was terrified of her. She is tall, and she looked angry, and I was like, she's going to beat me if I talk to her. And I talked to her maybe 4 times, and every time I talked to her, she still looked like she was going to beat me. And then one day, I continued to talk to her, and she just smiled at me. And now she loves me. We're best friends. We go out to eat together. And so I know the kids can be really intimidating. I speak from experience. I know that there are times when you're like, I do not know what to say. We have nothing in common, you know. But I promise if you just take the opportunity to talk to them, it's well worth it. It is well worth it. Some of these kids are coming from the most like destitute of situations, but they're coming to this church because they're looking for something, they're wanting something. And all they really require from us is love. All they want us to do is love them. And we have such an opportunity to do that because we're such loving people. We've got big hearts here. And I know if you took the time to know them, oh, you'd fall in love with them. I feel like I digressed again. But that is something that the Lord has taught me. It's just the importance of the ministry that He provides, that you don't have to go out to find it. It's right here at our doorstep. Yeah. Any other questions? Have I talked your ears off? Okay. Well, thank you so much for letting me share. I really enjoyed it. I like talking about it. If you find out that you have any questions that you'd like to ask, please come see me at any time in the given future, and I will gladly answer them.
Stay here. Don't go away. Thank you so much. That was exciting. I felt like we went on the trip with you every place you talked about. Yeah, except you. Well, anyway. No, you did great. You did great. Middlebrooks, please come on up here. We want to pray for you. Guys, whoever would come and join us up here, and we're going to pray for the Middlebrooks. And then after we pray, they'll go back to their seats, and we're going to have an invitation, and we'll sing, I Have Decided to Follow Jesus. And I want to give you the opportunity because it may be that God's calling someone, just as you said. It may be that person's here, and they need to respond today. So let's... Is Teresa going also? Teresa's going as well. And Teresa's going as well, and we want to pray for her also in this evening. Ms. Raby, I'm going to ask you if you would lead in this prayer, please, and pray for their safety and pray for their ministry opportunity. They're going to be ministering to children of missionaries and some others as they have an opportunity there. And be praying for them and pray for the Lord to use them, the 3 of them, on this particular trip and the dozens who are going with you. Because 62 of them going on this. It's a big trip. Very good.
Up close. Father, we bow before you tonight, and we've just been blessed with what Makita told us. And Father, we just saw the joy and the pleasure that was hers just to say yes to you. Now, Father, we do pray for Chuck and Winnell and Teresa. We know those 3. We pray for traveling safety for them. We just pray that you will bless them with good health, that there will not be any problems along this way, and all the others that's with them. I pray, Father, that they will touch the lives of the people that they're going to minister to, that there will not be a forgotten visit, but they'll forever, this will be delved into their life. They'll just always remember that these people have come to bless them and to minister to them, and that they'll just be a blessing all the way around. And Father, I just pray that as we've listened to what Makita said, that our hearts would be just broken for those around us that's just sitting here dying in their sin, and they don't know any better. And here we sit so comfortably, and we just go on our merry way. Forgive us, Father, where we have failed you in the past. And I pray, Lord, that you will touch each of our hearts, that we won't be afraid to speak your name, that we won't be afraid to walk up and speak to people and just be a blessing to them. I ask that you would use us in everything that has been touched to our heart, that we may have been aware of, that we won't be shy, but we'll just let you lead us, Lord, and use us for the rest of our lives. And we just pray this in your name. Amen.